Welcome to Tougies Take, episode 29. An episode I've been extremely excited about.
Yeah.
For about 12 hours now. I will say, I got some phone calls about last week's episode, and everyone was telling me how funny and hilarious I am. You know, same phone call I get every day. And I think I'm now going to pursue my lifelong dream of stand-up comedy. I made some phone calls, and I would like to make an announcement. I'm opening for a pretty big act, and that act is the Toronto Maple Leafs, the funniest team on ice. Holy cow!
Leafs fans, you already know it's going to be a long episode for you.
I watched Steve Dangle's video this morning, and I almost never watch Steve Dangle because I'm not a Leafs fan. And he just completely encapsulated it. And in a weird way, there is this Twin Cities relationship between the Florida Panthers and the Toronto Maple Leafs, where at one point they were tied for the longest playoff drought in hockey. And now neither of them can get past the first round. However, the difference is when you're a Florida Panthers fan, you know, everybody expects it. But when you're a Leafs fan, oh man, you train yourself to wake up to coal on Christmas morning. And it just happens again and again and again. And I can't wait to discuss everything that's going wrong. And in a weird way, before we start, I feel like Steve Dangle encapsulated it. The only way to fix this team is to change the uniform.
I mean, they are cursed. There is no other explanation. The curse of Harold Ballard lives on. Changing the uniform might not do much. Go back to being the St. Pats. Do what you gotta do. But again, Leafs fans, it's gonna be a rough episode. We nearly had a couple of different Leafs fans on the podcast. At the end of the day, though,
they were just too sad.
Yeah,
it wasn't good radio.
We didn't want to drag down the theme of the show, and that's honestly something, Teach, that, you know, I guess to quote unquote real talk this, like, we've discussed that in terms of what topics do we bring up. You know, like, in a way, yeah, we want people to know that they have allies with us. It's June now. It's Pride Month. Happy Pride Month to everybody. What was discovered in Kamloops with the 215 and the horrifying history that Canada has with these, you know, with these schools and so on and so forth, and everything that's going on in the States that's so fucked up. Everything that's going on around the world, it's like, okay, what do we bring up? What do we bring up? And at the end of the day, we felt it to be cruel to bring a Leafs fan onto this podcast. Granted, we didn't feel the same way about Buffalo Sabres fans with Architects.
Yeah. Well, so I think that's the thing, though, too, is like when they had been bad for so long, and in a weird way, the Leafs, they haven't been bad for a while. They've been disappointing for a while. And I think with the Sharks and the Sabres, when we had on Sinsky and on Texky,
on Dasher, on Prancer.
Yeah. On all those other guys, on Dixon and Nixon, and the other reindeer, which is really just a horse with bells. Anyway,
on Billy Joe.
On Billy Joe. On Angelina. Anyway, those teams have been bad for so long that I felt like we could bring people on and they would be like, it's like they had found a way to find humor in their suffering. And I feel like this offseason, a lot of Toronto fans are finally going to embrace that humor. Like, I'm already seeing it start to happen on social media, but usually it's fans of other teams. And now it's finally fans of the Leafs that are just like, oh, of course, this happened. But, you know, before we get into this, we speak of the curse of the Maple Leafs logo, right?
We do.
So,
Excited to see where you're going with this. I have a feeling.
Well, it's all four of today's questions are going to be about sports logos.
Okay.
So my friend Zach is a hardcore basketball fan. And we were hanging out the other day, and he brought something up to me. He's like, "Have you ever noticed that NBA logos almost all have basketballs in them? It's like the Heat logo, basketball on fire. Magic logo, magical basketball. Celtics logo, it's like it's a basketball playing a penny whistle. Like all of them are just ridiculous, right? So, without looking it up, can you tell me how many NHL logos have a puck in them?
Oh, God. All right. Well,
it is more than zero. It's more than zero.
First and foremost, I apologize for punching the mic. Secondly, also meant to bring up when I mentioned what had happened in Kamloops, irSSS.ca. That's 3 S's, irSSS.ca. Please check that out.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those topics that, again, we're a lighthearted hockey podcast, but still wanted to mention that. That said, I had to look up the NBA logos, and my God, the amount that actually have a basketball in them is incredible. Like, it's just one of those subtle things, maybe not so subtle, but you're just like, yeah, of course they got a basketball in them, but it's got to be about half, if not more.
Yeah, it's like the Utah Jazz. It's like a music note basketball. I think the Phoenix Suns is like a it's just a sun basketball. The Lakers is just a picture of a basketball. It's insane.
It is. So that said, hockey wise, and I haven't looked this up, how many have a puck?
Not a stick, a puck.
Not a stick, a puck. Oh my God. I feel like there has to be at least one, but my answer is going to be 0.
All right, so there's 2.
Jesus. People
and without looking them up,
that wrong too.
Without looking them up, do you have a wild guess? Knowing that there are 2, and these are just current primary logos, not
it's not Minnesota, despite you saying wild.
Yeah, so Minnesota. When I came up with this question, I had to like zoom in real close on Minnesota just in case there was like a puck hidden in the forest or something.
Mm-hmm. God, like we're not considering like the Tampa Circle a puck, are we?
No, we're not.
Okay. I'm not awakening. Oh. Anaheim? No, Anaheim doesn't. Oh, my God. The Coyotes. Are we counting the Kachina logo?
No, this is only their current primary.
I am floundering here, which coincidentally, Deej, is our fish of the week here on Wicked Tugna. So shout out to Baseball Fan who asked what was the fish of the week. It is the flounder.
Flounder, the fish of the week. Tertiary character from The Little Mermaid.
R.I.P. to the voice actor who just died to make the show even more sad.
Oh, God.
Actually, no, I think that was Sebastian for the Crab. Never mind. I don't know who played Flounder, but guess what? They're probably still alive. Hopefully.
It was probably one of like the Jonathan Taylor Thomas kids.
I think it might have actually been Jonathan Taylor Thomas. We're looking this up now.
Taylor Thomas as Flounder.
We're looking this up.
Jason Marin.
Jason Marin, who doesn't have a Wikipedia page, but he does have an IMDb, and he's still very much alive.
Oh, he's student number 2 from Beverly Hills 90210, the TV series.
Oh man!
What else? Apparently, he was in Back to the Future as Sherman Peabody, but I believe that's the dog, which is a really.
Anyway, if we're not counting like the Bruins B as a puck, I got no idea. That's the general consensus here. I am drawing a blank. Like I can think of all these circular logos, and it's like I don't think the Sharks have a puck, but they have a stick, and it's just I got nothing.
So the first one is the New York Islanders. They have a puck.
Oh God, they do, don't they? I should have known that given the circumstances, but hey, what are you gonna do?
The other one is a little bit more well hidden. And honestly, I wasn't sure if it was a puck at first, and then I realized that it couldn't be anything else, and that is the Washington Capitals have a puck in their logo.
They do, don't they?
You may have thought it was just a weird red dash for some reason, but it is a puck.
Well, here's the issue with the Washington Capitals. They are so damn irrelevant not being a playoff team that they just skip my mind.
Actually, just you never think of that little red dash. It's such a weird design choice. So also, because we cover the NFL a little bit, there are only 2 NFL teams with a football in the logo. Do you know what they are?
Nope, but I'll guess wildly. Oh, God. 2 teams of the football, 2 teams of the football, 2 teams. Well, does the Washington football team count, or are they just a W?
I believe they are just a W currently. They're they have like a seal as their current main logo is just like a red circle with a yellow W.
Yeah. I'll be honest, you caught me off guard with these questions. I'm feeling a bit off today anyway, so go figure. But yeah, the Dallas Cowboys.
That is a star. So it is the first one's the New York Jets.
Why are you taking the night off of streaming? Oh, I don't know.
Confused a star with a football, and now I got to have some more tests done. So the first one's the New York Jets. Their green logo.
I swear on my grandfather's grave I was going to say the New York Jets, but I thought their logo now was just the word mark. I didn't think they still used the football logo.
Yeah, they still use the football logo.
Well, they're also incredibly irrelevant, so you'll have to forgive me.
Exactly. And then the other team, and this is fascinating to me because I guessed them last when I was trying to figure this out, and I could not believe it because it is the most obvious football, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a giant football in their logo.
I have no excuse for not getting that one, aside from the fact that despite being happy for them, I try not to think about the existence of that team and their quarterback anymore because it makes me sad. So
those are the 2 in the NFL. So that was just to distract you and reset your memory, because now here's the next question. 4 NHL teams have a hockey stick in their primary logo. Can you name them?
4 NHL teams have a hockey stick. Washington?
Yes.
The Islanders?
Yes.
Arizona?
Nope.
Okay, so we're not counting the Kachina logo. Anaheim?
Nope.
No? Oh, you're still counting the webbed D.
Yeah.
Okay. God, Buffalo has the actual.
Yeah, it's just their current primary logo, because I believe that Ducks logo is technically their secondary, and then the reverse retro has them too. I guess they're third, not their reverse retro. Although, is that giant duck holding a stick? It is. It's a goalie.
Pittsburgh.
Stick, weirdly enough. Pittsburgh, correct.
I got one more, right? San Jose.
Yeah, correct. All right, there's all 4.
Hey, redemption.
So this is my absolute favorite. This is the final question.
Okay.
So there used to be 3 jerseys in the NHL that their primary logos featured eyebrows. Then Ottawa changed their logo. So there are only 2 logos in the NHL where the primary logos have eyebrows. Can you name them? One of them's obvious and the other one's hilarious.
Let's just throw Arizona out there.
No, that dog does not have eyebrows.
Okay, that coyote doesn't have eyebrows.
It's just differently colored fur.
Fair. Let's go with, good Lord, like I'm trying to go through the entire list of teams right now, and the Panthers?
No, the Panther
doesn't have eyebrows?
It does not.
Oh man, you have made me look like a fool today, sir. Pittsburgh has to have eyebrows.
It does. The Penguin has eyebrows, which is amazing. And the other one is the Chicago Blackhawks because it's a person.
Ah, God. Yes, Chicago. Another completely irrelevant team that I don't think about at all. That's my go-to defense. It's going to be a long show, folks.
The Penguin has eyebrows. So the Penguins have eyebrows and a hockey stick. No team has all three. Who can have it all?
The Seattle Kraken, if they ever change their logo.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm having difficulty transitioning from eyebrows to hair trimming. Don't shave your eyebrows unless you have to join a club that you probably didn't want to join in the first place. I don't know. But if you really want to, you can use code Tougie.
Yes,
20% off at
Manscaped.com.
Let's be honest. It's for your groin and body hair. You could probably get your eyebrows with it, but you'll look weird. People have questions at work, especially near the water cooler. You'll be the weird guy. They won't invite you to play softball anymore.
But you'll be you. And that's what Manscaped allows you to do, Deej. It allows you to express yourself, especially with the Lawnmower 4.0. The lawnmower, surprisingly, not just for your lawn.
Exactly. Anyway, use code Tougie, Tougie for 20% off at Manscaped.
Shave your eyebrows in the shower because it's waterproof.
Yeah, find a passive-aggressive way to leave your softball team. Anyway, I guess we're going to play... which intro will we play? Find out now.
This is the intro now. This is the intro now. Sounds good.
All right, and we're back. We're back with some viewer questions. Most of which coming from north of the border, but one that is not.
Yeah.
See, you know what? I have to address this. So the first viewer question comes from Stinger. And in case you're wondering who Stinger is the anthropomorphic bee that is the mascot of the Columbus Blue Jackets. And like most mascots, cannot communicate with people unless through Twitter. So Stinger writes us a question. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Which is a very mascot-y question to ask. And so first, I need to start by explaining that the woodchuck is a type of ground squirrel. Now, ground squirrels, unlike tree squirrels, lack opposable thumbs or the ability to grip in the same way a tree squirrel would. So if we're theoretically saying that the squirrel would be able to pick up wood and throw it, it would need to do so with its mouth. Now, the neck extension on a woodchuck, nowhere near the tree squirrels. The ground squirrels, of course, they're built to dig and burrow. So based on the radius of its neck, I mean, how much wood are we talking? We'll say a piece of mulch because that seems accurate. I'm sure it could kind of swing its head and get maybe 4 or 5 inches out of that piece of mulch.
Stinger, are you happy you asked? Are you happy? You managed to ask a question where one half of the podcast is, dare I say, squirrel obsessed. You done played yourself, Stinger. I'll see you out on the racetrack. Second question here, Deej, because I got nothing to add to that. I think you had said woodchuck carve you up a bat and you knocked it out of the park. This comes from Relabbit. It is another animal, so to speak, I guess, related question. Stupid summer question. What's more annoying, loud cicada season or mosquitoes? Now, here's the thing. It's mosquitoes. As somebody who lives in Maine and cannot walk outside his his new front door beyond 3 p.m. Eastern until about 10 because you'll get chewed alive. So I'll deal with the cicada.
So I guess my issue is those things are completely inseparable down here. They an either or between cicadas or mosquitoes would be a fantastic relief. That said, mosquitoes, because I live in Florida and I own a mosquito gun.
You would, wouldn't you? Please explain to the class, sir. I can see the cogs turning in your head. Please explain, sir. This mosquito gun.
It's basically like a shotgun with a turkey choke and a pellet spread. And if you're lucky, you can take out 1-2 Florida mosquitoes with it. But sometimes they're so big, they'll just take that shot and keep on going.
Oh, God, I don't know what this show is at this point, but it's fine. We'll move on. This one from Blake. What's a good team to support with a bright future? Actually bright, not Leafs 2017 version of bright. Well, lucky for you, the Toronto Maple Leafs managed to break your heart at the perfect time. As Patrice Bergeron still leads the Boston Bruins to glory, he will never retire, and his style of play will never fall off. So you could go Boston, or you could do the logical thing and support Seattle. But, supporting a bear versus supporting a mythological sea creature, I think there's only one option here.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like the Kraken have the brightest future, if only because they haven't made anybody sad yet. That said, can you imagine having a team with, 3 guys aged 21 and under that are performing at a high level and getting you out of the first round of the playoffs? Well, they're called the Montreal Canadiens. And their youth core is getting it done. So there's that.
Yeah. Shout out to the young, fiery upstart Montreal Canadiens. This comes from Tomas, lifelong Leafs fan for some reason. We could just end the question there. Can you please advise how to live a happier sports life? I also cheer for Brighton in the English Soccer League system, football, and the Detroit Lions of the NFL. So I make poor sports life choices overall. Now, Deej, for me as a Boston sports fan, I don't really know if it's right for me to tell people how to live a happier sports life because, let's be honest, I've had it pretty good. My general advice would be to, change your expectations. Like for Brighton, you're not winning the Premier League. But for like Toronto or Detroit, just be happy that your team made the playoffs. Just change up the expectations. The only reason you're disappointed is because the expectation was that your team that finished in first place in the division would have won in the first round. But, change up the expectations. Say, hey, we made the playoffs. We're still better than Vancouver. And nothing will get you through an offseason of disappointment than laughing at the Vancouver Canucks and getting them pissed off at you in terms of that fan base.
Yeah. In a weird way, you just... It's exactly that. You've got to temper your expectations, and you need to, obviously you're going to be emotionally involved with your sports team at some point, but you need to set a limit on that. It's very important to, after your team loses or gets bounced from a playoff round, you need to be able to be like, oh, we lost because of this reason, not I can't believe they lost. I know that's difficult with the Leafs right now because nobody knows why they lost, which is fascinating. And I guess you just, you got to take a objective look at why your team is winning or losing. And I think that's the best way to be a sports fan. Like, you can sit there and be like, oh, we got lucky on that game. Not, oh my God, we beat the best team in the world. We are the best team in the world. When instead, I'm sure a lot of Sens fans were thinking that after the comeback over Toronto earlier this year, which, not to rub salt in the wound, but yes, to rub salt in the wound. So it's one of those things where the lower your expectations, the more fun you have. And then just, if your team loses, try and find a scientifically objective reason that you can put that into words. Like, oh, Carey Price played out of his mind and Rocket Richard winner somehow couldn't put any pucks in the net. And I think when you're able to put a reason on why your team lost, it becomes significantly more fun because then you've got a direct problem to watch them fix.
You were one of the 16 best teams in the league. You weren't one of the 8 best. There's only 8 teams now coming up out of 32 that can be in the 8 best. So all things considered, you did okay. You did okay. This comes from Jared. Besides Patrice Bergeron, who's the best player to wear number 37 in NHL history? Olaf Kolzig. Moving on. This one also comes from Zach R. With Carey Price becoming the first player to make double digits in the salary cap era to win a playoff series, will GMs put more focus on playoff performance? I think it's already factored in at the end of the day. Justin Williams still made decent money towards the end of his career. I don't think you're going to see Devontae Smith-Pelly making $7 million a year because he turned it on in the playoffs that one time. So, I think it's factored in to a reasonable extent already, is my thoughts.
No, I think that's fair. That makes a lot of sense to me. I was trying to think of anyone else who's ever worn the number 37. That really just put a okay, I've got a good number. I have a good answer to that. Chris Drury.
Fair.
Also maybe Reed Duke.
Vegas Golden Knights legend Reed Duke. Deej, with that, I think that quickly brings us to the end of our lovely viewer question segment. We have a couple of quick things to talk about before getting into the playoff series here. And again, who knows how long the show will be with me feeling a bit under the weather. First things first, they announced the Vesna Trophy finalists. And Deej, it is basically the 3 that we expected. Fleury, Vasilevsky, and Grubauer. Vasilevsky becomes a Vesna finalist for the 4th straight season. Last person to do that was Martin Brodeur. The question is, who wins?
Who wins? I don't know. I think they give it to Fleury just because he's never... They just give it to Fleury on... even though he had a hell of a year this year, I think they just past achievements get reflected on the fact that Fleury's never even been nominated before somehow. And I think he walks away with a Vesna.
Yeah, no, that's my thought exactly. Again, Grubauer, good for you. You're not going to win. It's between Fleury and Vasilevsky. Obviously, too, it's a regular season award. The voting's done before the playoffs begin. I have to go with Marc-Andre Fleury for kind of the reasons that you pointed out. Vasilevsky deserves it just as much. I don't really think there's too much room for any fan base to be upset that their guy didn't win when it's going to go to one of those two. So, a deserving winner, regardless. Seth Jones, someone we haven't talked a ton about on this show because the Columbus Blue Jackets were terrible this year, has pretty much confirmed that he is going to test free agency. Now, losing Jones, bad for the optics of the team. And we talked about this in regards to Patrick Laine and what it would mean if they don't hold on to him. But they have lost Jones. They have lost Panarin. They have lost Duchesne. They have lost Bobrovsky. Of course, they traded Dubois for Laine. Not great optics for that team in terms of being able to get You say star caliber options, but I mean, the only star there to me is Artemi Panarin. I mean, Matt Duchene, is he a star? No. Like, I don't think Matt Duchene's, he's not. Like, he is an accenting player. Like, he is ideally your second line center. Sergei Bobrovsky isn't consistent enough to be considered a star goalie. Pierre-Luc Dubois is not a star, even though he was really good against Toronto in last year's play-in round. The only star there is Panarin. And in saying that, again, Seth Jones, you could get into the whole analytics good, analytics bad debate, but I'm certainly on the side of Seth Jones isn't what people think he is. So, honestly, I mean, again, the optics of losing Seth Jones because of his name value, not great. Long term, not giving Seth Jones $7-8 million, probably going to be pretty good for the team.
Yeah, it's interesting because Seth Jones is one of those players that passes the eye test, but then when you look at the actual both advanced and regular stats, he's just not there. It's really interesting. I mean, I have a hard time putting into words why Seth Jones is bad, especially when he's usually paired with Zach Werenski, who is one of the best defensemen in the NHL. I guess you could argue in a way that he's sheltered, and maybe with Werenski out for so long, we finally got to see what Seth Jones looked like on his own this year. But even then, when you look at his advanced stats, like his Fenwick and his Corsi don't justify how much money he's going to make, and they don't even come close to it, which is really fascinating to me. Because before he was traded to Columbus, and honestly, 17-18 when he was with Columbus, he was a dominant defenseman. And then those 40 games he played with Nashville before he got traded, he was a dominant defenseman. But aside from that, he's been below average. It's really fascinating.
So, all things considered for Seth Jones, I'm intrigued to see where he goes. Someone is likely to overpay for him, though, is all I will say. And the last bit of hockey news outside of the playoffs, the NHL Draft Lottery is tomorrow night, Wednesday night, that is. And, yeah, I mean, you look at it, the Buffalo Sabres with a 16.6% chance to win. Anaheim second with 12.1, Seattle at 10.3, as well as New Jersey at 10.3, and Columbus rounds out the top five at 8.5. The question is, Deej, do we see one of the teams that are most deserving to win actually win, or do we see a team like Philadelphia, Dallas, or New York win when they have an under 2% chance to actually do so?
I don't know why, but I feel like the Kings are going to win. I have a gut feeling that the LA Kings end up with the first pick.
Got to keep those California teams strong.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, it seems to me like one of the either Detroit, San Jose, or the Kings are going to walk away with this. Maybe the Senators. I still very thoroughly believe that the NHL Draft Lottery is not as transparent as they would have us believe. I'm not necessarily saying it's rigged, but I think the odds represented are not at face value. There's just, I don't know. It just seems to me like a lot of first round picks have been very helpful to certain TV markets lately.
Very, very true. And I mean, much like the New York Rangers, the LA Kings already have a decent stockpile of young talent. Could certainly use another big piece. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say that the Buffalo Sabres do get the number one pick because it's a year in which Owen Power is the consensus number one, but he's not as hyped up as a Lafreniere or somebody else. So this will be the year that the Sabres finally win.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me that they only have a 1 in 6 chance of getting that first overall pick. And I know they the big change this year, right, is they are only drafting 2 lottery picks, right? They're picking second overall and first
I don't remember if that
overall.
starts this year or next, because there's also the change, I think, next year of only being able to move up 10 spots.
Yes, so they are adding that next year, but I believe the draft lottery is only 2 picks this year. This year it is only the number 1 and number 2 pick.
Because
we'll
parity is the way to go at all times if you were the NHL. Parity in every single aspect. Speaking of parity, Deej, let's talk Toronto and Montreal again, shall we?
Yes.
I mean,
yes, we will.
Maybe not the smoothest segue in the world, but to recap here, and this is where it would have gotten very, very painful for Leafs fans or a Leafs fan had they been on this show, but that's okay. We'll start off by talking quickly about game number 6, as the Toronto Maple Leafs again battled back from 2-0 down to make it a game. They go to overtime. You look at the stats, outshot them 43-31. They were 0 for 4 on the power play because that power play never fixed itself, but they battled back. Jason Spezza, TJ Brody, only to then lose in overtime. Jesperi Kotkaniemi, because, of course, Nick Suzuki, Kotkaniemi, the younger talent for Montreal, stepped up more than the high-end talent already for Toronto. The Canadiens became the first team in NHL history to surrender multi-goal third-period leads in consecutive games from facing elimination, only to win both of them. You've heard that stat regurgitated a ton. And then, Deej, we get to game number 7, where Toronto lays an egg. That is the only way to put it. Down 3-0. William Nylander gets a late goal. It's a 3-1 victory for the Habs. They will move on to the least predictable second-round matchup ever, being Montreal and Winnipeg. As you mentioned, Toronto now has the longest cup drought in history. The Leafs have lost 7 consecutive possible closeout games across 5 different series since 2013. I actually think that might be up to 8 now. I mean, Deej, this was one of the worst performances on home ice in a Game 7 I think I've ever seen. And I saw the Bruins in 2019 in the Stanley Cup Final.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's some numbers that I think need to be stated. I know they talk about they now have the 54-year cup drought. But let's be honest, that 66-67 season where they won the cup was the last season of the original 6 era. They have not won a cup since it's been difficult to win a cup. There were only 6 teams the last time they won a cup. You walked into the season with the Buffalo Sabres first overall pick odds of winning the cup every single year. And then they added 6 more teams. And since then, the Leafs have been unable to repeat. And no one could tell you why. There's probably a curse or something. I think there's an issue with this team where every single year, if they don't win a cup, it's a failure. They could have made it to the Stanley Cup Finals and lost to Colorado, which I don't think is a possibility this year. But let's just say theoretically. And they would have been, what was wrong with this team? Who do we trade? Who do we get rid of? Why didn't we win a cup? Like, this team can't do anything other than win a cup and be considered a success in any way. And I think that's part of the problem.
I mean, you're not wrong, right? It's been the long-running joke of Leafs fans to say, okay, even if we win, the Steve Simmons article will be out the next day of here's why they won't win the next year. I do think, and I think we've seen it with the reaction on social media already directed towards someone like Mitch Marner. A big part of their problem, it's the reason why we said Habs in 7 if it goes 7. The pressure that is on that team to perform at all time, almost the expectation of failure. Like, it is almost ingrained in the culture of this team is going to blow it. How are they going to blow it? Why is this wrong? Why did this player... Like, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy at this stage, having to do with the fan base, the media, the city itself. I don't want to say they bring it upon themselves, but you look at the entire factor of that, and I'm going to be honest, it's a toxic situation. It is. I'm not saying the entirety of the Leafs fan base is toxic. Every fan base has their toxic supporters. But it is such a toxic environment that it's almost impossible to thrive. It's like you're asking a flower to bloom without sunlight. And then you're going, well, why didn't this flower bloom? It's like, well, I mean, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? So, I mean, you could say that's an excuse, but I mean, at the end of the day, too, I mean, yeah, your biggest stars did not perform. You had a fluke injury to one of your core members of the team, which even without John Tavares, the Toronto Maple Leafs were a better team on paper. I mean, they won 2 games, 3 games without him. It's something that even now with a little bit of hindsight, it's just well-crafted team, not perfect. No team is. Tampa's probably as close as you get. And it's just not really all that surprising. And I think the reaction post-failure, again, just shows you why it's even more difficult for a good team, even a great team, to succeed there. There's just so many outside factors beyond what happens on the ice.
Yeah. And there's so many moves this team made that were made with the confidence of them making it past this first round, getting the monkey off their back, and theoretically, going to a cup final. That, and I know this is going to be a difficult pill to swallow, but in a weird way, I think the weakness of this team is the blind faith of Kyle Dubas. I think he's a great GM. He just, when you look at his moves in retrospect, as if like, we're doing it this year. Like when you look at that Nick Foligno trade is now just a horrific sore spot in this team's season. I just, I don't know. I don't know what you, I don't know what you do. I think you just don't change anything for once. I mean, obviously there's some guys that need to be re-signed, but in a weird way, maybe that's the answer for this team is you just stop tinkering.
Well, I guess there's 2 trains of thought, right? And we'll get into this. We had a question from Frosty Blizzard Gaming. You can follow on Twitch as well as numerous others. What's next for Toronto? Because they have key players. How do they get the finishing touches? There are 2 trains of thought here. Either this is a Tampa situation where you don't do much tinkering with the core. You bring in the bonus pieces. You bring in your Barclay Goodrows and Blake Coleman, so on and so forth. Or this is like a Washington Capitals situation where people who you thought were a part of the core actually aren't. And you move on from that. You move on from them. And then you find your actual core. Like for a long time, it was Mike Green, Alex Semin. Like these guys are a part of the core. And, did they win with those guys? No. Like quite a few people moved on from that Washington roster. I mean, like the Boston Bruins as well in 2011. It's like, all right, here's a part of the core, a big part of the future. Here's Blake Wheeler. It's like, well, no, they traded Blake Wheeler for a 3rd-line option and Rich Peverly, and that's what they were missing. Long term, did it work out in theory? I mean, maybe not. I guess you can make that argument as to whether or not that necessarily worked out. But end of the day, I think it just depends on how you want to view it. And even now, I don't have that answer in terms of just what do they do? Do you keep it the same? Do you go for it? I genuinely, I don't have the answer. And I mean, obviously now you're talking about, well, the change in goal is going to happen. Like we already know, like Freddie Anderson's gone. Jack Campbell's their guy. Money-wise, it's the only thing that makes sense. Defensively, you have that thought of, well, Morgan Riley. And his contract's up at the end of this upcoming season. Are you going to be able to re-sign him? He's making $5 million now. He's going to get a raise. So what do you do? Like, if you decide to kind of retool and say, well, Morgan Riley's not a part of the long-term solution, do you get something for him this offseason to say, well, let's go ahead and make that change now? And then even if you do, what happens from there type of thing, right? And then, like you said, forward-wise, in terms of players to sign, I mean, obviously it's Riley Nash is off the books. You know, Wayne Simmons, Nick Foligno, Jason Spezza, Joe Thornton. If these guys come back, it's for dirt cheap. The big guy to worry about is Zach Hyman, who was one of their better players. So, I mean, there are answers no matter what way you decide to go. If you want to strip things down and say, oh, turns out this guy isn't a part of the solution, you know, that's fine. You can run with that for sure. If you want to stick with these guys, I mean, you're not going to be able to stick with everybody long term, but there are still ways to move forward. I think it all just comes down to the confidence you can have. And, you know, for a long time, the big player to look at was William Nylander for the sake of the lower cap hit to be able to move on from him. But obviously now you look at his performance in the playoffs and everyone's saying, well, what about Mitch Marner? Obviously, again, Mitch Marner is getting a lot of hate on social media. It's not exactly justified, but this is the guy that doesn't have a goal in his last two playoff runs. You know, there's the delay of game tendency, puck over the glass. Again, no matter which way you go, like there's a clear way to go down either path. It's just which is the best one for this team at this time. And I mean, really, it just depends, I guess, on how you feel about the team. And I mean, obviously, it comes down to how Kyle Dubas feels about the team.
Yeah. I think that regardless of how much he's getting paid, right? You have one of the top 5 wings in the NHL. What benefit is there to getting rid of him? I think is how I look at it. And I don't know. The call for Marner to be traded is very confusing to me, I guess, is my point here. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me why you would want to get rid of Mitch Marner. And I mean, even in these playoffs, I mean, Mitch Marner is not a goal scorer. Obviously he put up 20 this year in a shortened season, which is not bad at all. But Mitch Marner is a playmaker. He has, he's got vision. That's what you pay him for. And I know there's been all this talk about his ratio of the amount of points he gets that are actually him scoring a goal versus assists. But there's always been players like that in the NHL that don't score a lot of goals and get a ton of assists. A very good example of that would be certain, like Patrick Kane was he was always a guy that would get a ton of assists and not a lot of goals. And obviously that's changed in certain years depending on where he plays and who he plays with. And I mean, if you look at Mitch Marner's draft profile, he's directly compared to Patrick Kane multiple times. And I don't know, just because when the Rocket Richard winner miraculously can't score, in an entire playoff series. He gets 1. And then you look, I mean, I don't know why you immediately say, well, the second best player on this team needs to go. That, I don't know. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, right? Like, do you immediately override the regular season success that those two had together simply because of the lack of playoff production? I mean, it's just one of those things where, yeah, the discussion can be there of, even in Edmonton, obviously, right? It's joked about, like, all right, cool, Connor McDavid's gone. Do they trade Connor McDavid? Like, you have those conversations out there. If I am a Leafs fan, I'm obviously rooting for the side of restraint. You know, I don't think we're at that point where you can sit there and say, you know, for sure that this core isn't it. I think it's time to, you know, I think it is time to hunker down and run it back.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, there's obviously some decisions that need to be made. I mean, Zach Hyman's coming off the books. I mean, Nick Foligno's gone. Wayne Simmons is gone. Alex Galchenyuk's going to need to get paid if they decide to bring him back or not. I mean, obviously, I'm sure they will do whatever it takes to bring Jason Spezza back, but do you bring back Joe Thornton? And then you've got a lot of decisions to make on this roster, which is interesting because if you were to run it back, I think this team would see some playoff success. And now you're at a point where half of your supporting cast disappears. So what do? You know?
I mean, the big issue for them too, right, has to be the thought of, well, next year we're back in a division with Tampa, with Boston, so on and so forth, and how much difficult does it get? But it's obviously just the main topic of conversation with Toronto right now. What's next? And nobody knows, because you could view either direction as a viable option. So we'll see how that plays out. I mean, that's one of those things, right? Like, there's so much to talk about, but also it kind of feels like so little, because it's just, it happened again. But again, that narrative of it's going to happen again, oops, it happened again, is, I feel like, part of what put this team in this place to begin with. And I still wonder, too, if Auston Matthews is fully healthy. Like, we had that topic of conversation, and I get that after the wrist injury, like, he did all right, did pretty well, even. But I still just wonder, like, was it really that amount of bad luck? Was it really just a matter of hitting a slump at the wrong time? Was it a matter of Carey Price being a brick wall, which, again, statistically, like, he wasn't. He was good, but it's not as if he was, you know, putting on a, I guess, in terms of, like, history, like a J.S. Jaguar, like Jonathan Quick type playoff performance. Like, he was good. He made some big saves. Did what he does in terms of letting in some weak ones too. I mean, again, both argument can be true, that Carey Price was really good and helped steal the series, but also Toronto's scorers weren't there. Like, they're not mutually exclusive. One didn't happen because of the other. For Montreal, they move on to Winnipeg. One of these two teams will be in the Final Four, which is crazy. And obviously the thought is, like, right now it's pretty much a guarantee that whoever makes it out of this plays Colorado or Vegas, which, I mean, good luck, right? I mean, this is it. Like, you win the North Division, that's your championship for the year, because that, more so than upsetting Toronto and Edmonton, I mean, that's the big challenge right there, is what happens when you get out of the North. But Carey Price now, Game 7's in his career. I mean, he has a .949 save percentage in his career in Game 7s. And the Canadiens, came back from a 3-1 deficit for the third time in just the last 20 years. They did it against Boston in 2004. They did it against Washington in 2010. I mean, really, it's who, like, for this series as well, you talk about so many questions for Toronto. There's so many questions for this series on what the hell how do you view this one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, two teams that were viewed as underdogs in the first round. LOL, they could get there, but they probably won't. And now they're both here. And you do have that question of where do you go? How does this play out? Is it like, because if you look at the defense, it's tough to say one's better than the other. I'd put Montreal's ahead of Winnipeg's. Goaltending wise, though, I'd give Connor Hellebuck the slight edge over Carey Price at this point. And then the offense, like, both have that ability. Like, I might give the slight edge to Winnipeg, but I have no idea how this series goes. Not a damn clue.
Yeah. And I think that's the odd thing, is it could just go either way, because both of these teams that made it to the second round, they performed in a way we weren't expecting. With Winnipeg absolutely shutting down and sweeping Edmonton, Montreal somehow finding a second gear, coming back from that 3-1 deficit, having their young stars step up, as well as Corey Perry figuring out how to play like vintage power forward Corey Perry. And then Carey Price putting the team on his back. I think this second round, I mean, like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, Winnipeg is just going to absolutely destroy Montreal. 2 weeks ago, Toronto, they're just going to destroy Montreal. I think this is going to be a hell of a series.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a bunch of series being a toss-up. I mean, yeah, this feels like as much of a toss-up series as we've had so far, because, again, the expectations were so different for these teams. And, I mean, I guess you look at it like, okay, if it comes down to coaching, who has the advantage? Like, I guess on paper, I'd give Winnipeg the edge, but I refuse to rule out Montreal in this series. And that's kind of been the entire story of the playoffs so far. So, with that said, again, we'll see how it plays out. They play their first game on Wednesday. Montreal goes right back to it after eliminating Toronto. So we'll see how it plays out. That said, another series, of course, second round's already underway, as we know. Vegas knocks off Minnesota in Game 7. They do it in convincing fashion, 6-2, the final score there. So really, never in doubt for the Golden Knights. I mean, the post-mortem from Minnesota, pretty straightforward. I mean, it was a really good year. I mean, talk about the expectations of doing better than anyone expected. They do have to re-sign Kaprizov. He's an RFA, though. That'll happen, no problem. Like, he is the future of that team. I'll be intrigued to see, again, we talked about it in terms of the cap space that's available, the draft picks, the prospects. Like, Bill Guerin has a really good setup there. So this doesn't feel like it was like, oh, obviously not. Like, oh, this was their shot. Like, no, this is hopefully, for Wild fans, the start of something in Minnesota, Deej.
Yeah, you are a team without a first-line center. You have one elite scoring player. And you took the second best team in the entire NHL regular season to 7 games. You call those idiots in Buffalo, and you do whatever it takes to get Jack Eichel, because Kirill Kaprizov is an incredibly special player. And can you imagine if he does not have to put an entire team on his back? And it's the Connor McDavid situation, where when you're playing Minnesota, you really only have to play around one player. Can you imagine if there was 2-3 players to playing around? So this Minnesota team is incredibly scary. If I'm not mistaken, they have 2 picks. Yes, they also have Pittsburgh's first round pick in this draft. They have a ton of cap space with Marcus Johansson, Nick Bonino, Nick Bjugstad, Ian Cole, just a ton of UFAs coming off the books. I think they have something close to $20 million in salary cap to spend on top of having all these picks. That team's going to look awesome next year, unless their GM needs to be fired. There's 2 options there.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a fair point. You look at teams that, I guess, have the ability to go out and get someone like a Jack Eichel. They're definitely in that conversation. I mean, obviously that's, just a filler conversation, because who the hell knows, right? But end of the day, that is something I think that could realistically happen. They have the picks, they have the prospects, they have the cap space. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Bottom line is, though, for Minnesota, you went from being like the perpetual, out in the first round team to now legitimately there's a conversation about they could get Jack Eichel and do some real damage. So
yeah,
I'm sure Wild fans will take where the conversation is now versus where it was over the past couple of years. It's an exciting time, maybe the most exciting time to be a Wild fan that we've seen. For Vegas, though, their reward was moving on to play Colorado. Game 1, whether it was resting him or whatnot, Marc-Andre Fleury does not start. Robin Lehner starts. Colorado wins that game 7-1. I mean, it's a long series. A 7-game series is a long series. But man, the momentum of winning a game 7 and then getting blown out in the first game of the next series, that could ultimately cost the team. I get the idea that Fleury's play might have been dipping towards the back half of the series, but that is a mistake that you might not get the chance to recover from.
Yeah. I don't know how you could have expected Robin Lehner to be that bad. But he was. And I mean, maybe. I mean, I definitely understand the reasoning behind we need to rest Marc-Andre Fleury. Hopefully, Lehner can just do enough to get us one game. He's a very good goaltender. He's been good for a while. And then he was the worst goaltender I think we've seen show up to any playoff game at any point this year.
Which is
in that game
shocking.
Yeah, in a playoff conversation dominated by bad goaltending versus extremely good goaltending, he put on one of the worst performances I've seen. Nathan MacKinnon now has 12 points in 5 games in these NHL playoffs. Landeskog 11 points in 5 games. The Colorado team is a juggernaut, and I think maybe we underestimated, or I think maybe we could have overestimated Vegas just looking at this game. I mean, surely with game 2, we'll see how Vegas responds, but short of a serious player injury or a miracle, this Colorado team is so much better than everybody but maybe Boston and Tampa are close to them at this point. And I still feel like Colorado's so much better. So maybe Vegas wasn't as good as we thought, or maybe Robin Lehner's just that bad, or maybe Fleury's just that good. There's a couple questions to ask here, and just, I don't know. Regardless, Colorado doesn't care who's in net. Yeah, they just care that puck in net.
It is just one game, obviously. It's in terms of overreacting, that is what it is. I mean, I'll say this though, obviously Colorado's top line doing what they're doing is why it's so frustrating for Oilers and Leafs fans. Because it's, why couldn't our superstars have done that? That's obviously the conversation. So at the end of the day, I mean, we'll see how it plays out. I mean, I can't help but think that it's it's a Colorado Tampa final right now. It's tough to not say that those don't look like the two best teams. And I mean, for Boston, we'll get into them in a moment here, but I mean, yeah, I view those as the two best teams right now. Do the best teams always win the Stanley Cup? I mean, I guess that's the argument of, well, if you won, you were the best, but at least in terms of on paper, is that how it plays out? And I mean, again, we'll see how it goes. But Deej, aside from that, game 1, highlighted by Ryan Reeves. Another incident, especially after an incident involving Ryan Suter in the Minnesota series. He gets suspended for 2 games for essentially kneeling on Ryan Graves' head. According to the Department of Player Safety, both Reeves and the official acknowledged that Reeves pulled out a chunk of Graves' head, hair, I should say, from his head. There you go. He pulled out a chunk of his head. Keep in mind, Nazem Kadri, of course, got an 8-game suspension upheld. Not saying Nazem Kadri didn't deserve it, but your thoughts on the Ryan Reeves incident?
I mean, there's something so funny to me about them using the word acknowledge there. where they just like the ref and Ryan Reeves both acknowledged it. Like they both just looked at a clump of hair on the ground and nodded at each other. Like they just acknowledged it.
That's
like and I think this in a weird way continues the bizarre wall of disinformation from the NHL, where they just like make things as vague as possible. As the ref acknowledged it, let's find the vaguest word, the most vague word we can find. What's that team of NHL attorneys you chose? Acknowledge? Okay. I mean, they were headhunting Graves ever since the I forget which player he laid that hit on, but he got a clean hit with a guy with his elbow down, or he got a clean hit on a guy shoulder to shoulder that had his head down, and then he injured whoever was on the other receiving end of it. I'm gonna remember his name in a second and kick myself, but then they just spent the rest of the game not playing defense and headhunting Ryan Graves, which let's headhunt Ryan Graves. That'll win us a cup
for the record.
Janmark, thank you. I don't know what kind of hockey Vegas was playing. I don't know. The whole situation is just absurd to me, that somehow this hit on Janmark in a weird way got so heavily under the skin of Vegas that I won't say that it was entirely Leonard's fault. Leonard had a terrible performance, but in a weird way, it's just like Vegas did not care about winning this game, which was bizarre to me. And I think that Reeves hit was a symptom of that.
I think the criticism of Vegas is at times it's been, I guess, a little bit easy to get under their skin, and that there's that sense of entitlement in a way has been a critique from other fan bases. And I guess, I don't know, maybe this goes along with that, right? The idea of Reeves just being like, I'm going to jump this guy. Probably nothing will happen. And in the grand scheme of things, I guess nothing really did happen. So, it makes sense in a way. All things considered, though, the 2 games, at least he was suspended. I genuinely didn't think he would be. But I am getting to the point, Deej, and the NHL is winning. The Department of Player Safety is winning. Where genuinely I saw that, and I'm like, well, in the grand scheme of things, compared to what has resulted in a suspension and hasn't, was that really that bad? And clearly, to me, that's a symptom of the NHL wearing me down as a fan, to get me to the point where it's just like, I don't know. I don't even know what to question anymore in regards to incidents like this.
Yeah, I think in a weird way, regardless of your take on it, I think that was very similar to the Tom Wilson, Artemi Panarin situation. And that was that was just a scrum. So I don't know. I feel like maybe it's just, you're right. It's the Department of Player Safety. They're just, and it's so weird because I feel like, everyone's thinking at this point, the whole point of the Department of Player Safety is just to kick up drama and get people to watch games they otherwise wouldn't. And it certainly feels that way right now.
Yeah. So, we'll see what happens moving forward in relation to this series. Obviously expect more chippiness. Like, that's just bound to happen at the end of the day. That's just kind of how it goes.
I do have a rules question here that you might know the answer to, but I do not. And I'm sure at least one of our listeners, one of those two things, whatever sense you choose to digest this podcast with, has the same question. So Reeves got a match penalty, which is an automatic suspension for the next game. Now, Reeves' 2-game suspension, is that in addition to the match penalty, or is the match penalty included in that suspension?
I think it's in addition. So it's 2 games beyond getting
the match penalty. Okay.
Yeah. So the match penalty is essentially, okay, you get ejected, you're out of here. At the end of the day, though, legitimately, it's guesswork, though.
Yeah.
I'm like, I presume this is what it is. Can I say it with certainty? No. No, I can't, because it's the NHL. And as it is, there was something about the match penalty being rescinded, if I'm not mistaken. So, go figure.
Ugh.
It's the NHL, man. It's what they want. Sit here and say you care about the players, but at the end of the day, they still market the hard-hitting side more than the skill side. With that, only 2 other series to talk about here. I mean, so it won't be the longest show in the world, which, again, I'm thankful for at this stage. Let's talk about Boston and New York as the Bruins win Game 1 that I couldn't even watch because I'm in the middle of moving. But they win it convincingly, 5-2. David Pastrnak with a hat trick. All looks well in the world. They rough up Ilya Sorokin, and I'm feeling good. And then Game 2, one of the worst officiated games I think I've ever seen, which isn't surprising. That's just kind of how it works. Bruins are down 3-1 heading into the third. They pull a Toronto. They tie it, only to lose in overtime. They had some phenomenal chances. Honestly, this really was Toronto-esque. They had some phenomenal chances in that overtime. And then all it took was one mistake.
And then one phenomenal mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, as Jeremy Lauzon, who had a clear path to pass the puck down the boards, tries to fire it into the high slot, goes off a skate, and Casey Cizikas, of all people, just rushes it down ice, scores on the breakaway, and that was it. So a 1-1 split in Boston to start the series. Yeah, I mean, I still have faith the Bruins could win this series. I still think the Islanders could win this series. I mean, this could easily go 7, but a frustrating end to that game for sure, where, bottom line, for a time, it looked like Tuukka was kind of standing on his head. He was making some big saves in general. I wouldn't say that he did. I mean, you allowed 4 goals. I don't, his fault or not. I mean, I think you're rocking a save percentage around or below 900. I don't think you can describe that as he stood on his head. But, I mean, again, Varlamov had a great game. It was a good bounce back for him. Just a frustrating way for that one to end, unfortunately. That, you wish you could have back, because if this series goes a certain way, that's the game that you look at to say, yeah, that was the turning point, essentially. But, I mean, the crowd in Boston was great. The crowd for the Islanders is going to be great. I'm pumped but nervous at the same time for the rest of the series. I mean, these 2 games really didn't change anything about my attitude or viewpoint towards the series.
Yeah. I do think, so I only watched the third period of this game. And when I flipped, because I was watching Carolina Tampa, and what was interesting to me is, was I watching Carolina Tampa? I forget which game was broadcast with it. Anyway, this was the second game I watched that night, so I only watched third period. It was interesting for me to see Boston come back on a Barry Trotz coach team. I mean, they were down 3-1 with 11 minutes left in the third. And to see Boston get past such a ridiculously difficult team to score against in that third period, I think is victory enough. I mean, I know they didn't close this out in OT, would probably be ideal, but being able to come back almost at will on this heavily defensive, prevent pucks from getting to the net, let alone going into the net, Islanders team, is in a weird way a victory. I know it doesn't count on the score sheet, but knowing that you can do that against this team, the Bruins are still my favorite to take this series.
I mean, they outscored them 8-6 over the 2 games.
I mean, if they don't get lucky on that Lauzon play, there's no way the Islanders win that game without the Bruins making a huge mistake with the momentum they had.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that was going to be, I guess, how the Islanders won it, and it happened. So I don't have too much to say at this stage. I mean, 2 games in a 1-1 series, it really could go either direction, really. So obviously you hate to see Lozon make that type of mistake for a younger player. Exactly the reason why they decided to get rid of Chara, or at least not, why he decided to leave, because they wanted someone like Lozon in. But man, those mistakes happen. It just is what it is. You just hate to see it, cost a team in overtime. Indeed, aside from that, then, our final series to talk about, you already talked about Tampa and Carolina, game number 1. Tampa wins it 2-1 because it's Tampa. And my God.
Welcome to the
Tampa.
Andre Vasilevsky show.
Yeah.
I'm Andre Vasilevsky. Nothing gets past me. My God.
I mean, talk about should Vasi win the Vesna? I mean, the Conn Smythe might be a good enough replacement.
Yeah, right. I watched a very skilled Panthers team that was the only team in the regular season that was able to put up goals on Andre Vasilevsky. Struggle to put up goals on playoff Andre Vasilevsky. And we are looking at a Carolina team that has a lot of very good players, but this Carolina team, to me, on paper, is missing a very elite goal scorer. And they are facing the best goalie in the world that is trying to make a case for best goalie of all time. I don't see how Carolina can put up a significant enough volume to win this series. And I know there's only been one game, but I just don't see how they put up a significant enough volume of goals past Andre Vasilevsky to be able to beat Tampa, a team they don't rely on shot volume. They sit there and they wait for you to make a mistake, and their players do not miss when you make a mistake. And so they are going to get 2 to 3 goals every single game because of that aggressive style that Tampa plays, where they try and wait for one of your defensemen to make a mistake, and then they score on the rush. And they'll do that 2 to 3 times per game. And then they'll add power play goals. And that's how Tampa wins games. They don't win with 5-on-5 play other than keeping the puck on the perimeter and limiting your shot chances. In a weird way, they kind of play like a much more aggressive version of the Islanders, and I don't see Carolina able to counter that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a point that was mentioned, I think, in a viewer question or in the comments of the last YouTube video, in terms of the longer Carolina, the longer the series goes, it benefits Carolina because of home ice. But, man, Carolina falls down 0-2 in this series. I mean, it's tough to see Tampa not winning it in 5-6 at the latest. So it's not as if Tampa doesn't have fans in the stadium or their own home ice advantage, so to speak. So I'm intrigued, but again, it's tough not to favor Tampa. I will say as well, I forgot to bring this up for the Bruins and Islanders. They were missing Kevin Miller and Craig Smith. So hopefully they'll be back for game 3. I believe they will be. I hope, at the very least, I hope Craig Smith, because he's been such a huge addition for the Bruins this year. So we'll see what happens there. But aside from that, yeah, I mean, again, one game, can't overreact too much, but Tampa, you just can't doubt Tampa.
Yeah. I will say something about that Boston series I forgot to mention is while I was watching that game, occasionally I would see a Boston player make a very smart move to retain puck possession or throw off the defense in a way that opened up opportunities, and none of them led to scoring plays. But every single time that happened, and I looked at the jersey, it was Mike Riley. He has this very strange ability to open up lanes and not even necessarily fake out defenses, but it's been a while since I have seen somebody with the hockey IQ of Mike Riley. And I'm starting to understand why he looks so good on advanced stats, as he is now starting to pass the eye test of me, a guy that's not a Bruins fan.
That said, game 2 was probably his worst game in a Bruins uniform. So that also didn't help.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely made some mistakes, and he pinches a lot, which is interesting, but he makes very interesting decisions with the puck that I don't see a lot of players make, and they normally work out in the team's favor. It's very interesting.
So with that here, I actually think we're going to be looking at winding things down, a bit of a shorter show today. Not as much of the conversation to get into. Again, not feeling my best, certainly feeling worn down with the whole move thing. But yeah, still, hope you guys very much enjoyed the show. We will be back on Friday with more. Deej, with that, wrap us up here. The final word for this show.
How do I put a bow on this show? You know what? I'll just read a tweet. I will read a tweet that I tweeted out. It didn't get enough likes because it was hilarious, if I do say so myself. But on the when it comes to the Toronto series, a team that is leaf and tree themed got wrecked by a team with a lumberjack mascot, and people are acting like they didn't see this coming. And I just think it makes sense. You know, Youppi, the mascot. Don't tell me that man's not a lumberjack. What is he? Just a guy? No, he's a lumberjack. He wrecked this tree themed team, and I think in a weird way, it's a very poetic way to wrap up this series, because I think the real problem here is it's not what's wrong with Toronto, it's why did everyone ignore Montreal? And they were a very streaky team this year, but they hit the right streak at the right time. They were one of the best teams in the division for the whole first 10, 20 games of this season when Jeff Petrie was on a hot streak. And so, I don't know. They got Youppi the lumberjack. He came through. He cut down the tree. It's officially autumn, maybe even winter. I don't know.
In the words of great Canadian band Billy Talent, fallen leaves, fallen leaves, fallen leaves on the ground. Toronto fans got an interesting summer coming up.
That they do.
Goodbye, everybody. Potentially, unless Deej has something else.
Well, I guess it's going to be a long summer. You live in Toronto. Probably need to take your mind off of what was a heartbreaking playoff loss. And you know what? You know what you don't need twice this summer? That's right, another heartbreak. So how are you going to win over your loved one? You're going to use code Tougie. That's right. TOUGIE for 20% off at manscaped.com. Don't get your heart broken twice, Leaf fans. This time, the lumberjack's on your side. Clean up that foliage with code Tougie, TOUGIE, at manscaped.com. Manscaped, your balls will thank you. I'll see y'all on Friday. In June.
Tougies Take is a Deej Audio production. Deej Audio, you're listening to it. Copyright 2021. See you next week.